You don't end violence by addressing violence. You end violence by creating communities that create opportunity, increase education, ensure love, responsibility, and collective work and responsibility. That's what changes violence.
You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, you know, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves, and that we're going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened.
I stand here completely honest to tell you, Howard University, that if the shoe was on the other foot and Trayvon Martin would have shot unarmed George Zimmerman, he could have said, stand your ground, self-defense. He could have said whatever he wanted to say that night. He would have been arrested that moment. It would have been immediately. But when it's our children dead on the street, and they say stand your ground, it certainly benefits them. And what message does it send out, this stand your ground law? It sends that terrible message to society that we can be vigilantes and it's okay. Because as long as you kill your victim, your stand your ground argument got a much better chance of success.
Let me first of all tell you one thing that you may not hear, but you can say you heard it from the horse's mouth. When I was interviewed before, and they were asking me, how did all of this start? You can rest assured I mentioned Howard University. I did not start out by being an advocate. I started out by the love of my son. And even in his death, I am still working on behalf of my son. I tell people all the time that I have 2 boys that I'm working for, because I too have a son that's in college, that's in Miami. He's 22 years old. His name is Fulton, and he's majoring in IT. So I'm working for 2 boys. I'm working for Javaris, who's here on earth, and I'm working for Trayvon, who's in heaven. He's resting. And that kind of gives me some type of peace. I know I won't fully have peace until the criminal trial is over. But that won't be the end. That won't be the end for us as a people. That won't be the end for you as potential attorneys. That word attorney carries a lot of weight. It's not simply that you pass the bar and you have a law degree and now you're going to make a lot of money. I thank God for my attorneys. I thank God for Parks and Crump. Because if it had not been for Parks and Crump, where would we be? We had the right direction. We had someone not only knew the law, but they cared about us. They cared about my family. They cared about what happens to us. So you can't just be a good attorney. You have to care about people.
And so as I think about you all at Howard University, I think about the students. It goes back way before this day, this hour, this moment. It goes back to shortly after Tracy Martin, Trayvon's father, called me 2 days after his son was killed, coming home with Skittles and iced tea and the hoodie and the cold rain, because they kind of leave out that part of it, Dr. Carr. They just It was cold as hell. It was cold. It was cold. And he was, you all remember the NBA All-Star game, everybody, all the celebrities who went into the arena that night had big coats on, and it was raining. Don't take our word for it. Look at the document from February 26, 2012. And so Trayvon was walking home. This neighborhood watch being dark with a 9mm gun, killed Sybrina's baby boy, profiled him, pursued him, shot him in the heart. 2 days later, you know, they talk about we in the civil rights community had a rush to judgment. But 2 days after they had killed Trayvon, he had killed Trayvon, the Sanford Police Department made the decision that they were not going to arrest George Zimmerman because of this crazy thing called stand your ground. And it was Tracy Martin with that desperation in his voice, that sense of hopelessness, when him and two fine lawyers called from Miami saying, you know, we need you to get involved in this matter, Attorney Crump. And I remember Jeff going back through the facts, and I said, let me make sure I understand it. Your teenage son was walking home, unarmed, all he had was some Skittles and a drink, and he got killed by neighborhood watch with a gun. You don't need me, they're gonna arrest him because I'm a lawyer. And we see, you know, we're part of the court system. We see brothers get arrested on an innuendo.
Yes, sir.
On a suspicion that they might have did something wrong. No evidence at all. And you had this man with a 9mm gun, and you had a kid dead on the ground. You had Sybrina's baby boy dead on the ground. And yet, they let the killer go home and sleep in his bed that night. And so it was just shocking and disturbing. But I still have faith in our system that they were going to arrest him until Mr. Martin called me 2 days after I told him to give it a couple of days. And I had to apologize to Mr. Martin. I said, you were right. They aren't going to arrest him.
I would say that it's interesting. I was thinking about this. James Baldwin once wrote that from birth to death, there's something very personal about being black in America. And on the way over here, it's interesting when the police pulled up behind me, just going through their regular, you know, kind of routine. I got the feeling that we all here. And that's a feeling no human being should have. Certainly no citizen. And I understand that I will never draw a breath while I'm alive when I won't have that feeling. And that's a feeling that people of African descent have had since we've been on this side of the Atlantic over the last several centuries. And it is one that we only allow to render us inert or incapacitated when we don't resist it. And in that regard, as we know, matter can't be created or destroyed, it just changes shape. Brother Trayvon is not with us in material form, but his spirit has been loosed to enter all of us in a very different kind of way. And in that respect, we are always in his presence in ways that we could not have been even a year ago.
And we just had the opportunity to hear Trayvon Martin's mother, Sybrina Fulton. We would like to ask you what you are doing around the issue about Trayvon Martin, and are you someone that has been getting the word out for the students also, or for young people to better understand what this really means for our community?
And whether it's through commentary on Tom Joyner or being a part of providing some context for the media frenzy that took place immediately following Trayvon's death, I and others have been part of that voice. But more importantly, we're interested in how do we train students to be actively engaged. The media component is one thing, but training students about what was the trajectory of the stand your ground laws in their state, how can they be actively involved in challenging state legislatures to be able to rescind some of these laws or challenge some of the laws on the books. That's where the real fight is. And so the lawyers are going to handle this case, but citizens have to challenge the laws that allowed this kind of case to exist in the first place.
You know, I never even heard of Stand Your Ground until this situation came up last year. So how many other people do you think are really ignorant about Stand Your Ground?
Well, I think Attorney Crump said it well, that the Trayvon Martin case kind of took the veil off of this movement of laws that were being passed at the state level all over the country. But it's no different than anything else. I mean, the vast majority of the American public remains ignorant around a large number of issues that affect their daily life. And so that's why it's important for media personalities, for grassroots organizations, for churches, for others to be the sources of information, but not just information, but direction. How do we plug people? Because once people get passionate about an issue, pissed off about an issue, angry, sad, frustrated about an issue, that's the moment you have to be able to plug them into something that's addressing it. Otherwise, they get emotional and go home. And so, you know, again, it's one thing to share the information, it's another thing to plug people into potential solutions. And if we don't connect the two, then we're exciting people to a state of euphoric inactivity, and that just doesn't change anything.
Right. And finally, let me just ask you, Trayvon Martin was one unfortunate situation, one unfortunate case of one of our African American males. But what about the other thousands of loss of life of our youth, male and female, last year, the year before, and even this year, and all over this country?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting. People act as if there aren't black people fighting to address black-on-black crime, fighting to address issues of violence. So whether it's Father Flager and Ceasefire in Chicago, or whether it's the Peaceaholics that did a great deal of work for a long time in Washington, D.C., whether it's the Nation of Islam that's been doing work in certain places all over the country, there have consistently been people that are addressing issues of violence in our community. The challenge is, how do we support them to a place where we expand capacity versus reducing capacity as a result of lack of budgets, lack of training, lack of technical expertise, lack of research, so on and so forth. So if we can really support institutional infrastructure around building healthy communities, we would stop the violence rallies, and we would focus on building healthy communities. You don't end violence by addressing violence. You end violence by creating communities that create opportunity, increase education, ensure love, responsibility, and collective work and responsibility. That's what changes violence, not stop the violence rallies, candlelight vigils, and prayer services.
Well, and in fact, I did hear a priest just the other day out of Los Angeles who said the way to stop the bullets is to bring on some jobs.
Absolutely.
You know, and so then I'll end with this by saying there's also the need for people to be more sensitive and more caring and more loving again within our communities, because jobs, education, housing, and all of that is one thing, but it's another thing if you don't love someone and yourself or care about the people around you.
We are people who formerly were Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America. Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims. We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on...